The mare hit the pipe gate hard enough to ring metal through the cold, and Lena Hart, who had spent the last hour deciding whether a person could disappear cleanly before breakfast, took her foot off the gas. A man she had never seen came running out of the gray light with one hand on the latch and the other slick red to the wrist, and he shouted, "If you know anything about foaling, get in here now." The air smelled of wet iron, sage crushed under truck tires, and that sharp, animal fear no one ever forgot once they'd heard it breathing. Lena had been done with ranches since before dawn, done with barns, with blood, with people who looked at her hands first and decided what kind of woman she was. She had an overnight bag on the passenger seat, a thermos gone cold in the cup holder, and an envelope addressed to the state board in Helena that would make her retirement official the moment it hit a mailbox. But the mare screamed again, low and torn up from somewhere deep, and the sound reached under all that resolve like a hook. She was out of the truck before she could think better of it. Gravel slipped under her boots. The man shoved the gate wide and moved back fast when he saw she meant to take the lead. He was tall in the raw-boned way of men who had spent a life outdoors, silver at the temples, shirt half-buttoned, eyes steady even with panic chewing at the edges. Beyond him the mare staggered inside a foaling pen, sides heaving, straw dark beneath her tail. And if you're listening from your own patch of evening somewhere tonight, tell me where that patch is. A kitchen in Alberta, a porch in Georgia, a little flat in Leeds, a farmhouse in New South Wales. Stories like this travel best when folks leave the gate open for one another. Water bucket, clean towels, and stop pulling if anyone's been pulling, Lena said. The man nodded once. Tilly, towels. A little girl she had not seen at first moved out of the shadows by the stall door. 10, maybe 11. Narrow shoulders. Dark braid. She held herself very still except for one hand working the frayed hem of her flannel sleeve. She ran without a word. Lena got one look at the mare and swore under her breath. Red bag. The placenta had separated early. The foal was suffocating before it ever reached the world. She stripped off her jacket, plunged both arms into the heat and strain of that labor, and went to work with the same hard, quiet focus she had once trusted more than anything in herself. The foal was coming wrong. One leg folded back. Head turned. "Talk to her," she said. The man stepped in beside the mare's neck and laid his palm where the sweat stood in dark patches. He did not coo, did not panic. He spoke like he was giving directions through bad weather. "Easy, Juniper. Easy, girl. We're here." Lena found the shoulder, folded one leg forward, then the other. The foal shifted half an inch and nearly took her breath with it. Pain flashed clean up her arm. She leaned in harder. The mare shuddered. The little girl came back and stood ready with towels, lips white from biting them. "Now," Lena snapped. The man braced. The mare pushed. Lena pulled in one long practiced line that had nothing to do with force and everything to do with timing. A wet chest came free, then the head, tongue blue, eyes sealed. Another push. Shoulders, hips. Then 40 pounds of new life spilled into the straw and did not move. For one heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Lena tore the sack from the foal's nostrils, cleared the mouth, rubbed hard, harder, slapped once at the ribs, and bent her head to listen. "Come on." The foal coughed. Once. Again. Air caught. The little girl made the smallest sound Lena had ever heard from a human being, hardly more than a cracked inhale. The man put both hands over his face and stood that way for a second that looked private enough. Lena turned aside from it. The mare twisted, nickering low. The foal gave a thin, angry sneeze. Life arrived all at once and with poor manners, same as always. When Lena stood, her knees objected. Her hands were shaking, which annoyed her more than it used to. The man took the blood-stiff towel from her without comment and said, "Coffee's on in the house. I'm not staying. You just saved a mare worth more to me than the truck you came in with. Least I can do is feed you." The little girl looked up then, direct as attack. "Her legs are crooked," she said softly, meaning the foal. It was the first voice in the room that felt truly awake. "They're meant to be for a day or two," Lena said. "Everything comes into the world folded." The girl considered that. She nodded once, as if filing it with things worth keeping. By the time Lena washed at the utility sink, dawn had spread pale gold over the pasture. She learned the man's name was Elias Rowe and the ranch was Black Cotton, named for the wind-stunted cottonwoods along the creek that looked dark as soot by winter. He poured coffee into a thick diner mug and set it near her elbow. The little girl, Tilly, sat on a tack trunk with Juniper's halter folded in her lap, like church linen. Local vet? Lena asked. Missoula for anything major. Hamilton for the rest, when he isn't drunk or fishing. And you thought pulling a red bag foal on your own was the better option? I thought watching her die wasn't one. That answer was better than most she'd gotten from ranchmen. Better than some from veterinarians. He noticed the envelope on the counter when she pulled her keys from her back pocket. Helena. State Board. His eyes touched it and moved on. No questions. That, too, set him apart. I was headed south, she said, hearing how thin it sounded. Then I'm obliged for the detour. Tilly got down from the trunk and crossed to her. She held out something small and cold from her palm. A bent horseshoe nail polished bright from being handled too often. A gift, maybe. Or payment. In the currency of children and magpies. Lena took it. Thank you, she said. Tilly shrugged like it had cost her nothing, but the pink rose quick in her cheeks. Lena left before the gratitude in that kitchen could get organized into something dangerous. By 8 she was in town, if 3 blocks of feed store, diner, courthouse, and old brick buildings counted as town. She parked behind the clinic she had rented for the last 2 years and found the back door already open. Her metal cabinets stood on the alley concrete beside 2 cracked flower pots and a box of syringes she had forgotten to throw out. The landlord's son was loading the exam table into a flatbed. I gave you till noon, he said, not looking sorry. It's 8:15. Buyer wanted an early start. She looked past him into the stripped room. The place smelled of bleach and dust where antiseptic and hay ought to have been. Her father's wooden instrument chest was gone from the shelf over the sink. That box had followed her through 3 states and 1 marriage, through calving sheds, auction yards, and 2 clinics she had built with money she no longer liked to think about. She felt the loss of it with a steadier pain than she had felt selling the building lease. Where is it? He shrugged. Auction lot took the old stuff. Lena stood very still. Then she picked up the 1 carton that remained, the 1 marked files, and carried it to her truck. The radiator ticked when she started the engine. A bad sound. Not fatal yet, but headed that way. By 10 she had sold half her cabinets to the scrapyard for insult money, learned the auction lot had already sent the rest on to Butte, and sat at the diner counter with cold eggs turning rubber on a plate she had no appetite for. On the stool beside her lay the envelope for Helena. In her coat pocket sat 3 overdue notices, 1 parts bill, and a bus ticket she had bought in case the truck finally gave up where she could no longer bully it. She had spent 2 years closing one door after another and had mistaken the echo for peace. Marisol Pena from the bank came in carrying a stack of folders against her hip. She had a pin clipped to her blouse and the alert, economical look of a woman who had long ago learned that people heard more when she spoke less. You still in town, Dr. Hart? She asked. Until my truck decides otherwise. Try not to let it decide on Main Street. We're already short 1 lane where the county's digging. Comforting. Marisol's mouth almost smiled. You need another month on that note. Come see me before Friday. Lena laughed once without humor. I'm trying very hard not to need another month of anything. Marisol's gaze flicked to the envelope, then to Lena's face. There was no pity in it, which Lena appreciated. That usually means a person needs one, she said, and moved on. By noon the truck was steaming in the lot behind the feed store. Lena stood with the hood up and her hands on the radiator cap, waiting for the metal to cool enough not to skin her. She heard the pickup before she saw it. Black Cotton's truck. Mud on the fenders. Elias at the wheel. He pulled alongside, took one look under her hood, and said, That hose is split. Thank you. I had mistaken it for a decorative feature. He glanced at the boxes and metal cabinets lashed badly in the truck bed. You got somewhere to be tonight? The answer should have been yes. South. Away. Any place that required nothing from her. Instead, she looked at her own life tied down with fraying rope and said, Not particularly. I got a mechanic can patch that till he finds a replacement. I've got 2 more mares due inside 10 days. One of them foals like she resents motherhood in general. Come out, look them over. One night. You can leave in the morning. I'm retired. You aren't yet. That envelope's still sealed. She should have disliked that he'd noticed. She disliked more that he was right. Tilly sat in the passenger seat with a paper sack of grain tags in her lap and a jar of peppermints between her knees. When Lena hesitated, the girl opened the jar, took out 1 peppermint, and held it toward her through the open window like she was bribing a stray cat. Lena laughed despite herself. It came rusty. That your grand strategy? Tilly nodded. It was absurd how little it took to ruin a clean surrender. A split hose. A silent child. A man sensible enough not to crowd her. She shut the hood. Elias moved over enough for her to throw her bag into the back seat. And before she had any business doing so, Lena Hart was heading through the valley behind a truck that smelled of leather, horse sweat, and peppermint. They reached Black Cotton at dusk. The cottonwoods along the creek lifted black branches against a pinking sky. Elias got out first, walked ahead of the truck, and opened the ranch gate with one hand, while keeping his eyes on the road like he did it every day and expected no witness to the gesture. Lena should have seen it for what it was, simple courtesy. Instead, something in her chest tightened at the sight of a gate opened without demand, without bargain, without being made to earn the passage. She carried her overnight bag to the bunkhouse, then the box of files, then the crate with her medicine bag and the bent horseshoe nail tucked in its side pocket. By the time the gate clicked shut behind the last of her things, the life she had meant to leave had already altered course. Black Cotton woke early and without apology. Before sunrise, Lena could hear boots on porch boards, a bucket set down, hinges breathing, the layered knickers and shuffling weight of horses waiting on feed. The bunkhouse smelled faintly of cedar, wool blankets, and the old iron stove someone still believed in. She lay still a moment, letting the sounds sort themselves. It had been years since a barn noise reached her body as invitation instead of threat. She found Elias in the foaling barn checking udders with the back of his hand and talking softly to each mare as if introducing himself anew. Tilly followed with a notebook tucked under one arm and a flashlight hanging from a string around her neck. Chet Boswell, the ranch hand, came in carrying milk replacer, his lips always pursed around the ghost of a whistle that never quite formed a tune. "This her?" Chet asked. "This is Dr. Hart," Elias said. Chet looked Lena over, took in the age she could no longer hide. The wrists corded stronger than he expected. The lines time and weather had written where cosmetics never had a chance. "Had a woman shoe my gelding once," he said. Horse remembered her favorably. Lena took the pail from him. "I'll strive for equal acclaim." Chet barked a laugh, and that was that. Men like him, she'd learned, were easier than the polite ones. The days found a rhythm before she had decided to stay in them. Juniper and the red-bag colt stabilized. The older mare, B, needed her pelvis checked. A first-time mare named Clover wanted to kick holes through every wall between contractions, and Lena spent 20 minutes standing just outside the stall, not touching, not speaking, simply letting the animal learn the shape of her patience. Tilly watched everything. She wrote times in her notebook, checked water temperatures, held halters when asked. She spoke only when she had something worth spending words on. At breakfast, Lena learned Elias cooked eggs like a man with old grievances against chickens. At lunch, she learned he fixed tack with the neat hands of somebody who believed repairs said as much about a person as purchases did. In the late afternoon, she found him at the south fence mending a hinge with Tilly holding the screws in her palm. "The geldings keep leaning on it," he said, "or someone keeps slamming it." Tilly glanced down. Elias set the hinge pin in place and looked at his granddaughter without severity. "You can force a frightened thing through a gate once. After that, it remembers the hinge louder than your voice." The child nodded. Lena, standing back with a coil of wire against her hip, felt the line go through her like weather through dry grass. Elias said it to a girl and a gate. He said it to her too, whether he knew it or not. Black Cotton was not a big place, but it was a real one. 60-odd broodmares in good years, fewer now. Creek water under a senior right older than 3 county commissioners and 1 ugly lawsuit. A breeding shed, weathered barns, a main house with a porch that sagged an inch to the west. The kind of ranch that survived because people kept doing small correct things long after bigger men had declared the math impossible. On the third morning Calvin Sloan came by, Lena heard his truck before she saw him. Not because it was louder, but because it rolled into a working yard as if the ground owed it smoothness. He stepped out in a pressed pearl snap shirt, clean hat, boots too well-conditioned for mud. A handsome man, if you liked your handsome lacquered. He carried no hurry anywhere on him. "Elias," he said, shaking hands like an audience might be taking notes. "Heard you had trouble with Juniper." "Heard right," Elias said. Calvin's gaze shifted to Lena and rested there a moment too long. "Dr. Hart." I thought Helena had finally taken your keys. My hand still opened doors, Calvin. He smiled as if they were sharing an old joke no one else deserved. That's good. I've got an imported mare over at Sloan Ridge needs watching. Embryo transfer went sideways last season. I can pay double-day rate and triple if she drops at night. I'm not for hire. That a matter of principle or circumstance? Elias moved then, not between them exactly, but near enough the air changed shape. If you came to admire the barn, you've seen it, he said. Calvin kept smiling. I came to mention your note. Friday, isn't it? Shame about timing. Folks around here know I'd rather buy land than watch a bank take it ugly. We're all grateful for your compassion. Calvin's eyes went back to Lena. Offer stands. Sloan Ridge pays in cash. After he left, the yard felt colder though the sun had climbed. Tilly was the first to speak. I don't like how he looks at fences, she said. Lena turned. What kind of sentence is that? The true kind, Tilly said, and bent to pick burrs from a lead rope. It turned out the note was worse than Lena had guessed. After dinner, with the sky gone lavender beyond the corrals and the smell of coffee threading through the kitchen, Elias laid the papers on the table. Medical debt from his wife's last year. Drought losses. Feed bought dear and calves sold cheap. He had managed all but the final stretch. If the therapy riding program out of Missoula bought the 3 foals already reserved from this spring's crop, Black Cotton could make the payment and breathe. If they walked, Calvin Sloan would own the note by Monday. Why therapy riders? Lena asked. Temperament, Elias said. Our line throws steady minds. Kids need horses that forgive mistakes. That landed somewhere she did not like to examine. You should take Calvin's money, Chet said from the sink, drying his hands. Not his offer for you, he added to Lena. His offer for the place. Man's a snake, but a solvent one. Elias shook his head. Why? Lena asked. Because my wife planted those cottonwoods by the creek with a baby on her hip and a shovel she said was too dull for decent work. Because my daughter learned to ride in that east pasture. Because not every piece of land is a number a man can improve by leaving it less loved. It was not a speech. It was not designed to win anything. That was why it stayed with her. The easy path presented itself the next day with a fresh radiator hose, an invoice she could not comfortably pay, and Calvin's foreman waiting at the feed store with an envelope thick enough to feel from across the room. Half up front for a 3-day consult. More than Lena would make in a month anywhere else. Enough to clear the truck repair, the medicine bill, and maybe even the parts note if she was willing to postpone dignity in favor of survival. She stood in the sun outside the store with the envelope in her hand and thought of air conditioning in some rented rooms south of Idaho. Of not waking at 3 because a mare had gone off feed. Of not beginning to care whether Tilly had eaten enough breakfast or whether Elias's left shoulder still stiffened in the cold. Caring was the part that cost. Always had. Then Tilly came tearing across the lot with her notebook flapping and stopped short. Winded. Bees bagging up, she said. And Clover won't let anybody near her left side. Lena looked from the child to the envelope. You can tell Granddad no. Tilly said quickly, misunderstanding the silence. I just thought you'd want to know. There it was. The true choice. Not money against sentiment. Money against being necessary. Escape against being known well enough for someone to come looking for you in a feed store parking lot. She handed the envelope back to the foreman. Tell Calvin to find someone impressed by upholstery. The foreman blinked. That's a lot of money. I know what it is. By the time she got back to the ranch, the wind had changed. Warm for the season. Restless. The cottonwoods flashed their pale undersides like fish turning in dark water. Elias was stringing extra lanterns in the foaling barn. Marisol called. He said without looking down from the ladder. Payment has to hit the bank by close Monday. No extensions. Calvin by the note yet. She didn't say. Didn't need to. Be fold near midnight and did it clean. Clover settled after Lena spent 20 minutes with one hand on the mare's neck and the other resting on the stall rail, waiting for fear to choose boredom over battle. Tilly dozed on a tack sack with a blanket over her knees. At 2 a.m, when things were quiet enough to hear the wind combing the pasture, Lena stepped out onto the barn aisle and found Elias leaning against a post, hat in his hands. You don't owe us this, he said. I'm aware. Then why are you still here? She could have lied. Truck's not fixed enough. Bus doesn't leave till Tuesday. I hate being told what to do. Instead, she said, Because leaving from a place that needs you feels different than leaving from one that doesn't. He studied her a long moment, like he was measuring whether honesty required an answer. In the end, he only nodded. That was his gift. She was beginning to understand. He did not take more from a person than they had laid down themselves. Toward dawn, the sky took on that pale metallic look the valley got before a bad wind. Barn swallows flew low over the water troughs. Juniper stamped hard twice, then went still. Somewhere far out in the dark, a gate banged. Lena felt it before she heard it the second time. Not weather. Wrongness. She looked up. So did Elias. And tell me true, because by now you know enough to answer it honestly. Would you have taken the sure money and kept driving, or stayed where being needed felt dangerously close to being loved? The north pasture was open, not merely unlatched. Open wide, chain dragging. Chet was already running from the bunkhouse, pulling on one boot and cursing the other. Beyond the rise, shapes moved where no horses should have been moving that fast. Mares. Too many of them. Their bodies flickered pale and dark in the pre-storm half-light as they broke toward the cottonwoods and the wash beyond. Tilly. Elias barked. No answer. He was on the ATV before the word finished leaving him. Lena grabbed the med kit, a halter, 2 headlamps. Wind hit the yard in a hot slap that smelled of dust and electricity. Chet jumped into the pickup to circle wide. One of the lanterns blew out with a pop. The Mares thundered downslope. Fence posts blurred past. The ATV bounced so hard Lena bit her tongue and tasted copper. Juniper was among the front pair, belly low, stride wrong. Labor underway whether the rest of the world found it convenient or not. 50 yards farther down, near the draw, a smaller shape moved on foot. Tilly, Lena shouted. The child turned at the sound and nearly lost her footing in the tall grass. She had a lead rope in one hand and Juniper's halter in the other, trying to do a grown person's job with a child's weight. The mare reared once, not high, enough to wrench the rope through Tilly's palms. Elias cut left with the ATV. Lena jumped before it stopped moving. Drop it, she yelled. Tilly dropped the rope instantly. Good girl. Juniper bolted past, then checked at the lip of the wash where the ground fell away in a broken line of clay and sage. Lightning cracked somewhere over the ridge, bright and dry. No rain, just noise. The kind of storm that scared stock silly and set whole counties on edge. Lena caught Tilly by the shoulders. The child was shaking but upright. Were you hurt? I heard the gate, she panted. Granddad was in the east barn. I thought I could. Doesn't matter. It does. I know. Up there. With Chet when he gets here. I'm staying. The word came out with an iron she had not heard from the girl before. Lena almost argued. Then Juniper groaned from the wash. An argument turned useless. They got the mare half-sheltered against a cut bank as the wind rose. Elias came in low by her head, speaking that same weatherproof voice. Tilly crouched behind a sage clump despite orders, passing towels from the med kit with hands that shook only when idle. Lena knelt in the dirt, checked dilation, and felt every muscle in her back tighten. Red bag again? Elias asked. No. Worse and better. Foal's alive. Mare's exhausted. She reached deeper, found 2 front feet, then stopped. One hoof, then the other. Something in the feel of the pastern made her pause. Not because it was wrong, because it was familiar. She pushed wet mane from Juniper's shoulder and saw, half hidden beneath mud and sweat, the old burned scar of a brand she had not laid eyes on in 15 years. The heart split bar H. Her father's mark. She stared long enough for memory to strike clean through her. How'd you get this mare? She asked. Bought her dam at a dispersal in Oregon after the fire year, Elias said. Why? Lena swallowed. The world narrowed to the mare, the wind, and that brand. The fire year was the year after Ruby died. The year she sold every animal she could not stand to look at. Somewhere in all that wreckage, a line she thought she had lost forever had gone on breeding its quiet-hearted daughters without her. It did not save anything. It did not solve a single immediate problem. It only made the stakes unbearable in a newer way. Nothing, she said. Hold her. She went back in. Short breaths now. No room for extra thought. Rotate. Draw one shoulder. Wait through the contraction. Don't tear her. Don't hurry because fear wants hurry. Lightning again. Dirt in her teeth. Juniper strained and nearly folded. From the ridge above came the glare of headlights. A pickup. Then another. One with a stock trailer behind it. Elias looked up once and swore. That'll be Calvin. At dawn. He said if I missed the note, he'd take collateral before I had time to beg for sympathy. The first truck stopped at the fence line. Doors opened. Silhouettes against the white beam. Calvin in his hat and press jacket. Sheriff Amos Reed beside him, wide in the shoulders and unhappy to be there. Elias, Calvin called over the wind. I've got legal authority on the stock if payment isn't made by close of business Monday. Figured it was prudent to make an inventory. Elias did not answer. He could not. Juniper was going down. Lena, he said instead, voice breaking at the edge now. Tell you what. If we can save both. There it was. The doubled peril. Not whether they could win. Whether winning one thing required betraying another. Lena looked at the extraction chains in the med kit. Fast. Brutal if misused. A way to get the foal out harder than the mare ought to bear. There had been a time in her life when fear had made her choose speed over care. One wrong decision. One body that never forgave it. She still woke with that weight on her chest some nights, sure she could smell blood under soap. No chains, she said. We could lose the foal. We could lose her too. Another contraction hit. Lena worked with it, not against it, shoulders burning. Elias steadied the mare's neck and spoke low into the storm. Tilly crawled close enough to press her small palm flat against Juniper's ribcage, as if lending what steadiness she had. Above them the trucks idled, lights cutting long spears through dust. The foal came by inches. One foreleg. Nose. The mare sagged, found herself, pushed again. Lena pulled only when the body asked for it. Tom lost shape. There was only resistance, then yield. Heat. Mud. Breath. The old knowledge in her hands. Not gone after all, only buried under grief and disuse. At last the shoulders slipped free. Again, Lena said. Juniper gave everything she had left. The foal spilled into Lena's arms with a wet, heavy thud and lay still. No, Tilly whispered. Lena tore the membranes clear, rubbed hard. Nothing. Harder. Wind snapped the grass flat, and Calvin's trailer gate clanged once above them like a verdict. Elias knelt opposite her, one hand on the mare, one hand flat in the dirt to keep from reaching where he could not help. Come on, Lena said to the foal, to herself, to every closed thing in her life. The colt jerked, coughed, drew a raw first breath that sounded almost offended to be alive. Tilly made a sound halfway to laughter and halfway to sobbing. Juniper lifted her head. The colt sneezed mud from one nostril and tried, absurdly, to stand. From above, Sheriff Reed called down. Rowe, we need to talk before this gets uglier. Lena looked up, hair plastered to her face, arms painted red to the elbows, and met Calvin Sloane's eyes in the headlights. He gave the faintest shrug, as if this were all unfortunate but reasonable, as if men like him did not arrange themselves near disaster unless they expected to profit from the weather. They had saved the mare, saved the colt, saved the child from trying to carry a grown person's fear alone. But the trucks still waited at the fence, and the ranch still sat one business day away from being stripped. Dawn came hard and colorless after that, as if the valley had spent all its feeling in the wind. Calvin did not take the horses that morning. Sheriff Reed, to his credit, refused to inventory stock while a mare still trembled from labor in the wash. But Calvin left slow, confident, and not at all worried by delay. Men like him preferred consequences ripened in offices. Back at the barn, Lena checked Juniper for tears, dosed her for pain, and watched the colt find the udder on drunken, folding knees. Tilly sat on an overturned bucket wrapped in Elias's coat, face streaked, eyes too large. When Lena held out a mug of tea, the girl took it in both hands. You disobeyed me, Lena said. Tilly stared into the steam. I know. You don't go after scared mares alone. I know. Then why'd you? That took longer. Outside, Chet banged something back into place in the yard. The house screen door side once and shut. Finally, Tilly said, because everything keeps leaving when grown people are too slow. No one in the barn moved after that. Lena sat down on the straw bale across from her. She did not ask who had left. The child's mother, dead 2 winters now. Her father before that. One more man who had found quitting easier than staying. Loss rarely needed clarifying. It announced itself in the posture. Elias turned away on the pretense of rinsing a syringe. His shoulders had gone stiff in a way Lena was learning meant pain, not anger. Later, when Tilly finally slept curled in a blanket nest in the tack room, Elias found Lena at the wash station cleaning dried blood from her hands. The hot water had barely any pressure. The soap smelled of pine and iodine. He set something beside her on the ledge by the sink. Juniper's halter plate, brass, worn soft at the edges. On the back, under dirt and age, the split bar H. "I saw you look at it," he said. Lena dried her hands very carefully before she picked it up. "My father's brand. I bought the mare line cheap from a man who didn't know what he had. That happens." He studied her reflection in the dark window over the sink. "You bred them?" "My family did. Then I ruined a fair amount of what was left." "You didn't ruin this one." The kindness of that, especially when she had not earned it, made her throat hurt. He leaned one hip against the opposite counter, hat in his hands again. "My wife Ellie used to say bloodlines matter less than how a creature gets handled when it's frightened. She was usually right about things I preferred not to hear." Lena gave a small sound that might have been a laugh. "That sounds married." It was. Silence settled, but not an empty one. The barn breathed around them. Juniper shifted in her stall. The colt knocked softly against her side. "I had a daughter," Lena said at last, because the night had taken enough from both of them that withholding began to feel theatrical. "Ruby. She lived 11 minutes. My body survived her. The rest of me took longer. A few months later, I was in surgery on a mare I had no business touching that day. I told myself muscle memory would do what grief couldn't interfere with. I was wrong. The mare died. After that, every person in 3 counties remembered exactly one mistake and none of the 1,000 ordinary saves that came before it. Elias did not move to soften it for her, did not say that wasn't fair or that people were cruel. He just listened, which was harder to come by and often worth more. "I kept working," she went on. "Then I kept pretending work was the same as living. By this week, I'd narrowed the difference down to paperwork." He looked at the retirement envelope, now curled and dirty on the shelf where she had thrown it before dawn. "I stopped saying Ellie's name out loud for a while after she died," he said. "Tilly would ask where heaven was and whether the horses there needed feeding and if her grandma could see in the dark, and every answer felt like a fresh lie. Then one day I realized I'd made grief into the landlord and the rest of us were just renting rooms from it." Lena closed her eyes. He said it then without flourish, looking past her at the stall where Juniper stood over her colt. "Grief doesn't leave when love comes back. It just stops getting the whole house. If that opens something tender in you tonight, leave a like and stay with this channel. These are the stories for people who know a broken heart can still make room at the table." Neither of them spoke for a while after that. They did not need to. The truth had been said plain enough to do its work without help. The explicit chance for Lena to take more than she was owed came before noon. A woman from Hope Rains out of Missoula arrived to check the foals reserved for the summer program. Sandra Blake, square-built, sunburned, practical. She walked the barn with a clipboard and an eye that missed little. Juniper's colt stood long-legged already, ears pricked toward Tilly, who had somehow persuaded him the world contained more curiosity than terror. Sandra watched the child coax him through a narrow gap between 2 fence panels using nothing but voice and patience. "Who handled them after birth?" she asked. Chet opened his mouth. So did Elias. Lena had every right to answer first. Her hands had saved the colt twice, once from suffocation and once from being dragged wrong through fear. A line from Sandra's report crediting her work could have been turned into consulting contracts, references, a fresh beginning that belonged to Lena alone. She felt the shape of that possibility as clearly as a coin against the tongue. Instead, she nodded toward Tilly. "The girl made him trust the barn again," she said. "And the ranch gave him the kind of damn line that breeds steady. I only showed up at the messiest hour." Tilly turned at that, eyes wide. Sandra made a note. Later, Marisol Pena would notice it too when Sandra repeated the sentence in the kitchen. Elias noticed, but said nothing. That was better than praise. Praise often wanted ownership in return. Warmth came into the house by evening. Not safety. Not yet. But warmth. Kerr from down the road arrived with a chicken pie and the kind of curiosity widows felt they had earned. Sheriff Reed came by to ask measured questions about the North Gate and left with more interest than Calvin would have preferred after Chet showed him the chain. Cut clean through, not broken by wind. Tilly, listening from the stair, frowned the particular frown of a child rearranging memory. "The game camera," she said suddenly. All the adults turned. "The one by the salt block. For the fox with the torn ear." She was already moving toward the mudroom. I put fresh batteries in on Thursday. They found the camera half hidden in rabbit brush 50 yards from the north gate. The memory card was wet at one edge, but readable. Elias slid it into his old laptop at the kitchen table while wind still worried the eaves, and everyone leaned closer than they meant to. There were 3 nights of deer, 1 blurred coyote, Tilly's own boots at dusk when she checked the salt, and then, 2 hours before the storm hit, a pickup nosing up to the fence line. Calvin Sloan's pickup. On screen, his foreman got out with bolt cutters. Calvin stayed in the truck, profile lit by the dash. The foreman cut the chain, swung the gate wide, then rehooked it loose enough to fail with one good shove. The truck backed away without hurry. No miracle had arrived. No stranger rode in with justice. A careful child had set a camera for a fox, and a vain man had mistaken ordinary people for 2 distracted to prepare. Sheriff Reed watched the clip twice and exhaled through his nose. "Well," he said, "that simplifies my morning." Calvin did not go to jail in handcuffs at sunset. Life is usually more bureaucratic than that, and perhaps that is best. What happened was quieter and in its way more final. Sheriff Reed opened an interference complaint. Marisol Pena informed Calvin the bank would not transfer or accelerate a note while sabotage affecting collateral was under investigation. Sandra Blake, who cared less about local power than horse minds, signed a purchase agreement with a deposit substantial enough to cover the immediate payment on Monday. Hope Raines wanted all 3 foals, and after seeing Tilly with Juniper's colt, Sandra asked whether Black Cotton would consider a standing partnership. Some places spend years trying to look trustworthy. This one had it in the walls. Calvin came by that afternoon anyway, because men like him believe in personal correction long after the room has moved on. He found Lena at the south pasture filling water troughs. The sky had gone clean blue after the storm, which seemed to irritate him more than rain might have. "You could have brought that footage to me first," he said, "so you could save me the trouble of watching you lie." He smiled thinly. "You think this is over because a bank clerk bought Rowe a week and a charity woman likes his foals. Hope Raines isn't a charity. They pay on time and read contracts all the way through." He let that pass. "You don't belong here, Lena. You know that. Places like this take what's useful from a person and call it family till the bills come due." The old version of her would have argued. She would have listed injuries, named betrayals, offered evidence until the truth lay around their feet in strips. Instead, she set the hose down, straightened slowly, and said, "The bills have come due. That's how I know the difference now." He looked at her a moment longer, perhaps waiting for the wound he remembered to reopen on command. When it did not, something in his face loosened. Not remorse, not humility exactly, but the first hint that his opinion might stop mattering here. That was enough. Monday morning the bank smelled of toner, floor wax, and wet coats. Marisol sat behind her desk with the note papers aligned in a stack sharp enough to shave on. Elias signed with the pen Tilly handed him from both hands, solemn as a church acolyte. Sandra's deposit receipt lay on top. So did the interference hold on Calvin's transfer request. Chet stood by the door pretending not to be there for moral support. Kerr had found an excuse to deliver scones to the lobby and stayed to eavesdrop in plain sight. When the final signature was done, Marisol stamped the paper and looked over the rims of her glasses at Elias. "You're current," she said. The relief that crossed his face did not come like triumph. It came like a man setting down a load he had become too used to carrying. He closed his eyes once, opened them, looked at Tilly first, then at Lena. Outside the bank, the valley had one of those impossible Montana mornings where everything looked newly washed though no rain had touched it. Across the street, a flag snapped on the courthouse pole. Somebody at the diner dropped a tray and cursed. Ordinary sounds. The music of a world not ending. Elias said, "I need fence stays and diesel." "You." Lena had her truck keys in her pocket and, for the first time in days, a hose under the hood that might actually survive the pass. She could have driven south that hour. No one would have called her cruel. No one could say she had not done enough. Instead, she heard herself say, "I need a mailbox." For what? She took the retirement envelope from her coat, looked at the red dirt thumbprint still dried across the corner, and tore it clean in half. Then in half again. The wind took one strip, and Tilly caught it before it hit the gutter. "For less than I thought," Lena said. The weeks that followed did not turn easy simply because they had turned right. That is not how good endings work. They are built, not bestowed. Hope Raines sent tack lists and temperament notes. Sandra came twice more, each time leaving with new respect for the way Black Cotton handled its horses and for the small dark-haired girl who could gentler a colt with nothing but stillness and nerve. Chet stopped referring to Lena as doctor with that half-teasing emphasis and started bringing her coffee the way he brought Elias's, strong enough to wake stone. Kerr spread the story of Calvin's gate sabotage so efficiently that by Sunday everyone from the feed store to the Lutheran Fellowship Hall told it, as if they had personally witnessed his embarrassment. Sheriff Reed's investigation became the sort that made respectable men hire attorneys and avoid eye contact in the grocery aisle. As for Calvin, he did not explode. He diminished. His offer on 3 neighboring parcels dried up when word got around that his business methods photographed poorly. The county tabled his guest ranch permit pending review of water access disputes. He still wore press shirts. He still spoke in that smooth, unhurried way. But the world had begun answering him with paperwork instead of deference. And there are few fates more educational for men like that. One evening, near the end of June, Lena found Elias at the gate where the whole thing had begun. He had replaced the cut chain, hung the hinges true, and sanded the latch smooth where rust had caught. The creek ran low and silver beyond the cottonwoods. Juniper's colt, bigger now and full of leg, shadowed Tilly along the fence line with the faithful awkwardness of the newly weaned. "My truck's loaded," Lena said. Elias nodded. He did not ask where she was going. She loved him a little for that before she had admitted the larger fact to herself. He rested one arm on the top rail. "There's a room over the mudroom nobody uses but spiders. Marisol says Hope Raines wants a resident foaling consultant by fall if we can clear the permits for the adaptive arena. Tilly says she won't hear of anybody else checking night mares because you know the difference between mean and scared." He looked past her shoulder at the old truck, then back at her. "I'm too old to make grand persuasive statements. But I know what the place is with you in it, and I know what it was before." Lena laughed softly, because if she did not she might cry, and she preferred not to make a spectacle of sacred things. "That all?" "No. But it's the part one trust to come out straight." Tilly had reached them by then, Colt at her elbow. She held out the bent horseshoe nail Lena had carried in her pocket for weeks. "You forgot this once," she said. Lena looked at the child, at the man, at the gate standing open between road and ranch. The impossible thing at the start had not been love. It had been the idea that she might let herself be loved without first becoming whole, useful, unbreakable, redeemed. Somewhere between the wash, the kitchen sink, and a bank desk in town, that lie had finally run out of room. She crossed the gate without drama. No music. No witness but the 3 of them and a colt mouthing Tilly's braid. She took the nail from the girl, then reached for Elias's hand with the same calm she used around frightened mares. No grab. No demand, just an offered steadiness. His fingers closed around hers like they had been learning the shape of that choice for some time. By October, the adaptive arena stood where the old equipment shed had sagged for years. Hope Raines trailers came twice a week. Children who had been told their bodies could not do certain things sat taller in black cotton saddles than they did anywhere else in their lives. Tilly kept 2 notebooks now, one for foaling records and one for sentences she did not want to forget. Juniper's colt had grown into his knees and his good sense at nearly the same pace. Some evenings Kerr brought pie nobody needed. Some mornings Chet whistled actual tune fragments before coffee. The world had not become painless. It had become inhabited again. One sharp dawn Lena stepped onto the porch in Elias's coat and saw frost silvering the pasture wire. The cottonwoods along the creek were half gold, half bare. Down by the south gate, Tilly unlatched it for a van from Hope Raines and then stood aside as careful as any hostess receiving honored company. Elias came out behind Lena with 2 mugs of coffee, handed her one, and leaned his shoulder lightly against hers. No speech, no ceremony. Below them the latch flashed bright where years of use had polished the metal clean, and some things learn your touch so quietly you don't know you've come home until they answer to it. And if you'd like one more story after this, come back for the one about the widow who found a sealed cavalry letter under her barn floor and the drifter who knew exactly why it had been hidden. Until then, take care of your heart and good night.